The University of Queensland in Australia is widely known for its alliance with agriculture and food innovation. Because of the ever-changing world, they've stepped up their game and incorporated a whole lot of science in the way we produce food. But how exactly are they achieving this, and why is it really necessary for farmers to adopt these new techniques? Well, lucky for you, this video is all about that. So let's find out. Up first, UQ claims to reshape the future of farming. As global citizens, we owe a lot to STEM majors. After all, they spend their time cooped up in labs, performing experiments upon experiments just to give birth to new techniques and technologies that are unheard of, and these new innovative methods that help us navigate through our lives easier and make this world a more suitable place to live in despite our current calamities. Keeping the incentive in mind, researchers at the University of Queensland have vowed to come up with new ways to revamp the practices of traditional farming in order to adapt to the rapidly progressing world. UQ has appointed Paul Gauthier, who has joined the Alliance of Agriculture and Food Innovation, as the professor of protected cropping to pioneer this project and drive it towards success. He is one of the prominent voices of vertical farming and protected cropping, and is an industry expert who shares a plethora of knowledge involving both the environment and its various ecosystems. UQ believes Paul's experience as a researcher is crucial to the terrain of the project, and his vision for farming sets a precedent for how agriculture and its present-day methods should transform in the coming years. So why is it important to modify our farming techniques? Well, guys, food production is one of the biggest concerns of every government out there. It has been for centuries, and will be for generations to come. After all, it is basic life necessity, and ample amounts of it should be available to everyone regardless of any demographics. Food is extremely important for our survival, but sadly, there's a lot of disparity in its distribution and availability. And to combat this shortage and to bridge the gap, we need to come up with ways to not only increase our production, but also be wary of how climate change affects it. Because let's be real, guys, climate change is not a hoax. It is real. It is happening, and it's here. All around the world, natural disasters have heavily impacted crops and ruined their yield, which ultimately leads to inadequate produce. And if such conditions persist for a long time, then that also means those places could be hit with severe famines, affecting thousands and thousands of people. This is certainly not an ideal situation to live in, and thus, actions to counter climate change and revolutionize farming must go hand in hand to save populations from suffering through this chaos. Increasing population growth is another factor that gives rise to more demand in food production. And even if you're not well versed in the economics of the world, it's a simple concept to know that when there's an increase in demand, there should be a subsequent increase in supply too. The COVID-19 pandemic was also a very reflective example of how food shortages can have severe consequences on people. Remember when shelves in Italy ran out of pasta? Yeah, it seemed too apocalyptic for the 21st century, and we can't even imagine our lives without those carbs. But how does UQ promise to achieve its goals? So as we mentioned earlier, Professor Paul Gauthier's undertaking as the lead of this project is a crucial factor in how UQ will reshape farming. Gauthier spent much of his life obtaining a PhD in plant physiology from the University of Paris-Sud in France, and was also leading the R&D new product and system innovation group at Bauer Farming in the USA. His experience allowed him to carefully understand how vertical farms are a sustainable choice to curb economic polarities, and also serve as a sustainable farming choice for the environment. Paul's main focus will be on empowering the next generation of farmers in the tropics and subtropics, as he believes that by introducing vertical farming there, farmers can multiply the yield by 100 times their original production. That certainly sounds like a lot, and you'd be surprised to know that the entire concept of vertical farming is actually pretty sustainable and doable in most countries. The need of the hour today is reinforcing innovative ways in the agri-food sector, and it seems like vertical farming might be the answer. So what really is vertical farming? Vertical farming is the practice of growing food indoors in layers by using LED lights and keeping the growth and nutritional requirements of the plants controlled. This means that you don't really require pastures of land to grow crops anymore, or mourn over the loss of perfectly yielded ones after untimely rain. Through vertical farming, you can grow as much produce as you want in a shelter, as long as it's grown in a stacking manner and provided with optimal living conditions. In fact, it's already practiced in many parts of Europe and amounts to 1,000 tons of food a year. That's almost as many as 9 adult whales. Another benefit of these farms is they don't require many pesticides, and also save a lot of water. This can yield higher quality produce, while also preserving our finite water resources. A food tech startup known as Nordic Harvest says that vertical farming uses 250 times less water than regular traditional farming does. And just imagine, if such a practice is introduced worldwide, then maybe our water scarcity issue can be resolved too. Vertical farms also don't rely on daily weather forecasts. So, be it a hailstorm or the worst rain recorded, as long as these shelves are under a foolproof shelter, nothing can stop those cherry tomatoes from growing. And what are some other benefits of vertical farming? Well, aside from using less water, did you know that these farms will enable farmers to harvest crops at least 15 times a year? It sounds like labor intensive, but having agricultural produce ready almost every month is certainly better than waiting for biannual harvest every year. Crops usually require acres of land in suburbs, and rural areas that are far from civilizations require a greater amount of food staples every day. This adds up to transport costs of trucks, airplanes, and sea freight, which can eventually increase the the overall cost of the product, and supplied from neighborhood buildings without having to worry about any expenses of transport. Not only will less fuel be consumed, but the food will reach the markets quicker and be fresh as ever. And then the growth conditions of these crops are so carefully monitored and controlled, the yielded products gain a longer shelf life and can last up to 13 to 14 days after harvest. This is a stark contrast to the short-lived freshness of produce from traditionally grown crops, and we know just how exhausting frequent grocery trips can get once your food goes bad. Now, if vertical farming is so good, then why aren't more countries doing it? Vertical farming sounds like a concrete solution on paper and void of any errors because it was designed to be made this way. It's the perfect blueprint of the future of agriculture. However, there are some factors that do hinder their practical application, and one of them is the biggest hurdle of all: the costs. Traditional farming requires sun and rain, both of which are free gifts of nature. Whereas to power LED lights and run softwares for these sophisticated growing systems, a lot of electricity is needed. Currently, most of the world depends on fossil fuels for electricity production, so you can see how that serves as an ethical debate when it comes to the implementation of these farms in the name of sustainability. While renewable energy is an alternative source, only a percentage of the first world countries use it, and then there's the overhead cost of the shelters required for the growth of these farms. If rent has become exponentially expensive, then just imagine the condition of urban real estate. An average square meter of the city center in Melbourne retails at $2,300 US, and given how much space is required, this can leave a pretty hefty bill for the farmers who aim to pursue vertical farming. However, not all efforts will go in vain. Regardless of the challenges that Professor Gautier and his UQ team will have to tackle, they're pretty confident that the research will bring forth excellent results that will address every concern people have regarding food production and sustainability. The QAAFI team has expressed their trust in Gautier and hopes his research will help UQ maintain its reputation as a global leader in agriculture and food science in the near future as well. That's a wrap for this video, guys. What do you think about this new age of farming? Do you think UQ's efforts to reshape farming landscapes are sustainable, or is it just a pipe dream with an expiration date? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more awesome videos like this. Until then, see you next time.